From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefanía Bravo, and this is From the South. President Donald Trump gave orders to federal agencies to begin reuniting children with their parents who were separated at the Mexican border. The move to reunite families comes after Trump signed an executive order on the matter. Although his decision will move parents with children to the front of the line for immigration proceedings, it doesn't end a 10-week-old zero-tolerance policy that calls for prosecution of immigrants crossing borders illegally under the country's criminal entry statute.
We have a situation where some of these places, they're really running them well, and I give a lot of credit to Secretary Nielsen and all of the people that have worked. It's the nicest that people have seen, but it's still something that shouldn't be taking place. My wife, our First Lady, is down now at the border because it really bothered her to be looking at this and to seeing it as it bothered me, as it bothered everybody at this table. We're all bothered by it.
Our correspondent in Washington, Jorge Gestoso, has more.
Thank you. There's still a lot of confusion on how is going to be implemented the executive order of President Trump at two levels. One, how the parents are going to get together with the 2,300 children that has been spread out all over the United States. And the second part is, even though the executive order stopped the separation of children with parents, only have 20 days to come into the country with the children. After 20 days, the children has to be separated again. So there's still a lot of confusion. There's not going to know how long it's going to take children to get together with parents. There's cases, for example, that parents have been deported already to Central American countries mostly, and the kids are already here. So they don't know that the parents are not in the country any longer. So there's still going on a lot of question marks, and that is exactly the most important thing that is going on today. People do not know exactly what the executive order is going to be implemented and how the kids are going to get again reunited with their parents. We'll get back to you now.
Thank you, Jorge, for your information. Meanwhile, Melania Trump, wife of President Donald Trump, visited a border detention center where migrant children were separated from their parents are being held. But first, Lady Melania Trump's choice of clothing for the visit has stirred controversy. Photographs of Trump boarding an airplane at Joint Base Andrews show her wearing a green military-style jacket. The back of the jacket read, "I really don't care, do you?" in white lettering. Mrs. Trump's spokeswoman Stephanie Grisham responded to the ensuing social media frenzy on Twitter. Today's visit with the children in Texas impacted Flores greatly. If media would spend their time and energy on her actions and efforts to help kids, rather than speculate and focus on her wardrobe, we could get so much accomplished on behalf of the children. Hashtag she cares, hashtag it's just a jacket. Mexico will have a new president in only 10 days. As election day approaches, citizens continue to denounce vote buying attempts in the poorest and most vulnerable regions in the country.
In the municipality of Naucalpan in the state of Mexico, where residents built their homes with their own hands, neighbors tell how every 6 years representatives from the ruling party offer them building materials in exchange of votes. Only solidarity within neighborhood organization has prevented them to be victims of what is known as clientelism.
We
are well aware of their attempts to manipulate the vote. They always come full of promises, and afterwards, we are just marginalized again. We are not citizens to them.
Mexican actor Diego Luna, along with other artists, made a call for a civic awakening so as to keep working after the election day.
Vote for whomever you want, but be aware that you are not voting just for you, because whoever wins is going to rule all of us, and we all hold the same responsibility.
Presidential candidates who have been attacking each other throughout the entire electoral campaign have at least agreed to urge the current government to take measures to protect Mexican migrant children in the United States.
There is an arrogant and racist attitude in deporting children, putting them into cages and separating them from their parents. That needs to stop.
Separating a child from his mom and dad is something that has no name.
There is nothing more important than the protection of our children. Donald Trump's attitude is unacceptable.
Mexicans living abroad are sharing their voting experience on social media.
I will vote for Morena Party, for the government of Mexico City, for the Senate, and of course for the presidency. Morena's victory is the only way for our country to move forward.
The Mexican electoral body reported that over 2.7 million volunteers have registered to watch over the 155,000 polling stations across the country.
Former Uruguayan President José Pepe Mujica has visited former Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva at his Curitiba prison. The former Uruguayan president was accompanied by the head of the Workers' Party, Gleisi Hoffmann. Our correspondent, Mia Alberti, has more.
Today has been quite an important day for Lula da Silva here in Brazil. He's been visited by his friend and former president of Uruguay, José Pepe Mujica. The two leaders have been friends since 2005, and in fact the last time they saw each other was in March this year here in Brazil when Mujica was attending a Lula rally. And he's been a very ardent follower and defendant of Lula's innocence. He believes that Lula is being attacked, and he also believes that Lula should be president of Brazil. Now today he has attended a vigil outside of the prison in Curitiba where Lula is, and he was accompanied by Gleisi Hoffmann, the president of the Workers' Party, Lula's party, and she has just been acquitted of a corruption case just this week, so this is a very important timing. And also, next week, the Supreme Court is going to debate whether Lula can be freed or not, so this is a very important timing for Lula. So we'll be here getting every information and updating you.
Brazil regarded Lula as if he was kind of a big brother. I have to acknowledge to him, and we all should be recognizing him always. This is one of the things that confirms our past friendship. I found him in a very good mood and with some weight loss. He was reading a lot of books. He is of course concerned about the future of Brazil and our America.
There are hopes that talks may restart in Nicaragua after the government invited the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights to accompany the dialogue. That was one of the opposition's main demands. Our correspondent in Managua, Maria Jose Diaz, has more.
People's expectations are high and growing around the national dialogue's resumption in Nicaragua. The government officially invited international organizations to accompany the Verification and Safety Commission created during the national dialogue. The request was made by the Episcopal Conference to have these international organizations witness and mediate the conversations. The government has invited the High Commissioner of the United Nations for Human Rights to the country and also the European Union to accompany the efforts of the Inter-American Human Rights Commission. It is expected that the Witness and Mediation Commission will call for the resumption of the dialogue and work tables. On the other hand, the Foreign Affairs Commission of the National Assembly has confirmed its support for the national dialogue and peace restoration.
Thank you, Maria Jose, for your information. Masaya has been one of the Nicaraguan cities worst affected by the violent campaign to remove President Daniel Ortega. But as hopes rise of a return to talks, local residents have been helping to remove the paving stones from opposition roadblocks and repair the roads. The roadblocks have made movement very difficult for many communities. A delegation of clergy has traveled to Masaya to, in their own words, console our brothers in the opposition. But as they were on their way, some residents heckled them.
Look at what's happening in Masaya. They destroyed the school in Masaya. They destroyed the maternity hospital. So don't try to silence us.
casa materna. Padre, que no nos callen.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us.
Más puta.
Más puta.
¿Pa' dónde?
¿Para dónde?
Bien, muy bien.
Welcome back. Argentina suffers a humiliating defeat by Croatia, and Peru goes down to France. All that and more with our Jose Daniel Lopez in our World Cup special.
Thank you, Steffi, and welcome to our Telesur Russia 2018 special World Cup coverage. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez, and here are today's headlines. We start with the results from today's matches. Argentina lost 3-0 against Croatia. Ante Rebic, Luka Modric, and Ivan Rakitic scored in the second half to give Croatia the victory. Football legend Diego Maradona supported his home team from the stands. In Group C, Peru lost against France 1-0 in Yekaterinburg. Kylian Mbappé scored in the first half to seal the victory for France. Football fans in Peru were able to follow their team not only in Spanish but also in their main native language, Quechua. Luis Soto became famous for narrating Peru's matches at the World Cup. He's the host of a daily sports show on a community radio called Inti Raimi. Let's listen to what a football match in Quechua sounds like. Latin American fans have traveled to Russia for the World Cup. Let's have a look at how Spanish speakers are overcoming the communication barrier.
Russia has been transformed into a vibrant melting pot. However, very few Russians speak English or Spanish. In cities further east, like Yekaterinburg, where matches are taking place, English is even more rare.
We are using the language translator on our phones, which is the best way to communicate with local people. They give us their phones to put something in Spanish and translate it into Russian. And when they reply us in Russian, we have to use our phones to translate it into Spanish.
Others have spoken about how difficult it is to even read the Russian language, as the letters are not what they think they are. But they also remark how hospitable and patient the Russians have been when trying to talk to them, despite the language barrier, breaking Western stereotypes of being cold and standoffish.
The letters don't really define what it really is, the actual letter. So like the H is not an H, an N is not an N. Sometimes the A is not even an A. So it's really difficult to understand what exactly are we reading. Yeah, they've been really patient with us because they understand that we're from a different country. So it's very good on both ends to have that little common ground that we know that, you know, there's a language barrier. So we need to take some time to communicate with one another.
Some Peruvians have been using hand gestures and simply pointing at what they want.
We wanted to eat something, but no one speaks English or Spanish, so we had to order our food with hand signs and pointing at the menu.
It has been complicated. I tried to communicate with people in English, and most of them do not speak it. I had problems when I got into my hotel because nobody spoke English, and my reservation got cancelled. So I had to find another hotel, and it was really hard. It took me 2 hours to find another hotel.
Yekaterinburg is one of the most important business hubs in Russia. The city has experienced an economic and population growth recently with around 1.5 million inhabitants. It's hosting matches between Egypt and Uruguay, France versus Peru, and Japan against Senegal.
On Tuesday, Senegal fans celebrated the defeat of Poland to secure the first African win at the FIFA World Cup in Russia. Senegal fans packed at a public square in the capital city of Dakar to watch the game.
We are really proud, and all of Africa is also proud of Senegal. We want Senegal to go very far in this global competition. Why not in the semifinals or even in the finals? Even if we can't win the World Cup, we would at least like the Senegalese national team to reach the finals. That's what we're looking for. That's our wish. We want Senegal to be one of the top 3 teams in the world.
Today we are proud of Africa. Imagine, Nigeria lost its first game, Egypt too, Morocco did the same, but Senegal came to save the whole African continent. Long live Senegal!
Denmark and Australia drew 1-1 in the city of Samara. Christian Eriksen scored in the beginning of the game for Denmark, but Miles Jedinak scored a penalty goal in the end of the first half for Australia. Now let's take a look at the group points. In Group C, France holds the first position with 6 points. Denmark is in second position with 4 points. Australia in third position with 1 point. And with no points, Peru is eliminated from the tournament. Croatia moves to the top of Group D with 6 points, qualifying to the knockout stage. Iceland and Argentina have 1 point each, and Nigeria sits in the bottom with 0 points. Tomorrow, Neymar and Brazil will try for their first victory facing Costa Rica in St. Petersburg. Nigeria will play against Iceland, and Serbia will face Switzerland. And that's all for today's Telesur Russia 2018 headlines. Don't miss our exclusive show, De la Mano del 10, the World Cup according to Maradona, only on Telesur English. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Back to you, Steffi.
Thank you, Jose Daniel. More stories now. Colombia's president-elect Iván Duque has had his first meeting with the outgoing president Juan Manuel Santos to discuss the transition between the two governments. The meeting at the Nariño Palace came as the two men's supporters have been at loggerheads in Congress over legislation to implement the peace deal with the FARC. At Duque's request, the Senate has refused to discuss the law, raising concern over the future of the peace process. The Attorney General in Colombia delivered a report on electoral crimes. 6 congressmen could be charged in connection with an alleged network of electoral corruption.
Reports say there was a criminal group at the service of the electoral campaigns, primarily in the elections of the senators and representatives of the lower house. The report also says brothers Julio and Mauricio Galin were summoned for questioning. The Attorney General also spoke of 6 other congressmen who are also being investigated and have been called for questioning as well. Let's remember that they've already been denounced by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which had previously spoken out about vote buying, not only within the campaigns but also inside the National Registry.
Women's organizations in Venezuela are taking their demand to decriminalize abortion to the National Constituent Assembly. More details from María Elis Fuentes.
A women's rights demonstration took place in the center of Caracas, where several Venezuelan feminist organizations such as Araña Feminista and Tinta Violeta, and also LGBTI organizations and campesino organizations were outside of the National Constituent Assembly to request the Venezuelan government a debate about the decriminalization of abortion. After a couple hours, the organization entered the National Constituent Assembly and were received by the Gender Equality Commission. This commission received their demands, which include a reform in a couple of articles of the Constitution about the use of the term conception of life. They agree that this term needs to be transformed since it comes from a religious background and it doesn't specify the protection of women's life during pregnancy. They demand the state to reform the Constitution to protect life of every Venezuelan woman.
Thank you, María Elis, for your information. And we return now to Mexico, where the case of the 43 Ayotzinapa students who disappeared in 2014 is being featured by none other than the Royal Shakespeare Company in Britain. A new play called Day of the Living is on at The Other Place in Stanford-upon-Avon. It uses masks, music, and Mexican folklore to tell the story of the students who were seized by the police as they tried to travel to a demonstration and then disappeared. 4 years later, the students' relatives are still campaigning against what they believe is a cover-up by the government. And earlier, we spoke to one of the actors of the play, Álvaro Flores, about the importance and the impact of the piece.
It's cruel. It's wrong. You know, to all of us. I'm from Mexico, of course, and I guess when so much violence and corruption happens, you become a little bit blind to it. And with this project, to all of a sudden find out and hear that there was a student, for example, that the mask of his face was cut off while he was still alive and taken off, and his eyes were taken out, and you're like, you know, it cannot keep on happening. So that's, I think, people wake up to this violence that is happening right now in Mexico, but it's also happening in other parts of the world. And it's great to see people shaken and people wait at the end of the play to have a word, and then they ask, what can we do about this? How can we help from here?
And now let's turn to our correspondent, Edgardo Esteban, in Buenos Aires for a look at developments in Argentina since the IMF agreed to give the country a record-breaking line of credit.
The government of Argentina announced it is receiving the first $15 billion as part of this agreement with the International Monetary Fund for $50 billion that they sought to find an alternative to this economic crisis that has increased the value of the US dollar in Argentina, and thus rising inflation, which some are saying might reach 30% in 2018. The government of Mauricio Macri hasn't fully controlled the situation, and the stock exchange has fallen also in an alarming way recently. There seems to be no way out for the economy, despite the announcement of a new economic infrastructure to tackle this. Now there's a general workers' strike scheduled for next Monday, where all transportation will be stopped. This is marking the anger towards the workers' union after the rejection by the government to negotiate salaries and poor working conditions. The president is also canceling several public appearances. He wasn't present at the celebration of the Day of the Argentinian flag due to the fear of public protests by activists.
Thank you, Edgardo, for your report. In Turkey, thousands of Republican People's Party supporters turned out for a mass rally in Izmir. The People's Republican Party, most commonly referred to with the acronym CHP, is the largest opposition party facing off against President Erdogan's AKP. Addressing the crowd, CHP presidential candidate Muharrem İnce expressed explicit criticism of Erdogan, who he referred to as a tired man.
After 16 years, you cannot name one person he's friends with. Erdogan is now a tired man. He's an unexcited man. He's looking down on people. He's an arrogant man.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's wife, Sarah, has been charged with fraud over the alleged misuse of state funds in ordering catered meals at their official residence, the Justice Ministry said. The indictment charged that Netanyahu, along with a government employee, fraudulently obtained more than $100,000 for hundreds of meals supplied by restaurants, bypassing regulations prohibiting the practice if a cook is employed at the home. British Prime Minister Theresa May is to mark the 70th anniversary of the arrival of Windrush by announcing a National Windrush Day on Friday. However, the announcement hasn't gone down well with victims of the immigration scandal. Meet Winston Robinson, who traveled to Britain on the Windrush ship in the 1960s. After building a life for himself, his world was torn apart by the scandal as he came to be considered an illegal immigrant. Robinson lost his job as an ambulance driver and faced the threat of deportation.
Who cares about all that? All that is just talk. It's unnecessary. I mean, that should be natural anyway, because these people came here, right, on your invitation, to put it blunt, to clean your shit and do all your bloody stupid jobs, which you spoilt your people by giving them dole money, and some of them, the dole money was enough, so they didn't bother to go to work. And that was wrong. That was what's wrong in this country. You know what I mean? And so basically foreigners came here to pick up those pieces.
And before we end today's show, remember you can watch our special World Cup program with Diego Armando Maradona. De la mano del 10, the World Cup, according to Maradona, will air only on Telesur every night during the World Cup in Russia. These are the times to watch it, so don't miss out. And we've come to the end of this news brief. These and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.